former president for meeting with anti-Semites?
Sir,
you said you condemn anti-Semitism and the mainstreaming of anti-Semitism. Do you condemn the former president for meeting with anti-Semites, for entertaining anti-Semites and anti-Semitism?
Let me just explain it to you this way, sir. I know the president is not an anti-Semite. He does not need to apologize.
I'm not asking you if he's an anti-Semite. I'm asking you if you entertain, do you condemn him for entertaining and meeting with anti-Semites? It's a very simple question.
Well, I'm trying to give you an answer that
it's a yes
I wish
or
you
no.
wouldn't have met with him.
It's a yes or no.
I didn't realize I was on a witness stand here, Don. Look, I'm trying to have a substantive conversation about a real issue like anti-Semitism, and you're trying to make it all about Trump. It's not about Trump.
Well, it is about Trump. We're talking, sir. We're talking about the former president meeting with an anti-Semite. How is this not about Trump?
Because it's about the anti-Semitism. It's not about Trump. It's about making sure that the issue of anti-Semitism is confronted in a substantive way, in which, obviously, I'm sure you're aware there's rising anti-Semitism in the United States and the world. It certainly is important for us to take it on. It is important for us to call it out. I am calling it out. I am saying he should not have met with Kanye West and a sidekick. What I'm also trying to point out, Don, is that it behooves you and CNN and every other press outlet to call it out when you see it, especially when it comes in the halls of Congress, especially when every Democratic presidential hopeful goes and kisses the ring of Al Sharpton.
CNN does that. And when the issue is someone in the halls of Congress or in the government who is trafficking in anti-Semitism, CNN will call it out. This is about Donald Trump meeting with a known anti-Semite and someone who traffics in anti-Semitism. This is not about any other people who may have trafficked in anti-Semitism. When they do it, we'll discuss it, and we'll have you on to discuss that part of it. But no whataboutism. So let's stick to Donald Trump and Nick Fuentes and Kanye West. Okay? Can we do that?
Well, we are doing that, Don. But, if you're going to make me, do a yes or no with you, yes or no, should Ilhan Omar be condemned? Yes or no, should Rashida Tlaib be condemned?
Omar or Tlaib.
Yes or no, should President Obama condemn Louis Farrakhan? It's not about President Obama. And Jeremiah Wright. Yes or no, Don?
This is not about Jeremiah Wright. This is about Donald Trump and Nick Fuentes.
Well, why don't you want to talk about the problem of anti-Semitism?
Because they're not meeting with them at their homes. They're not meeting with anti-Semites. They're not meeting with anti-Semites. And the reason that you were invited on this program was to talk about Donald Trump this weekend meeting with known anti-Semites and whether you condemn it as someone who worked for the administration and who is Jewish. That's what this story is about. That's what you're here to talk about.
I see, Don. So if there's an answer that you want from me, why don't you tell me what that answer would be?
That answer would be one of not whataboutism. It would be one to directly address the situation at hand. It would be one to not what about anti-Semitism. It's right. You think it's okay or it's wrong. Was it wrong to meet with him? The answer is yes, it was wrong to meet with him. Should he have met with him? The answer is no, he should not have met with him. It's very simple.
Don, it's very rich when you're telling somebody who is Jewish, who has experienced anti-Semitism firsthand, who is a grandson of Holocaust survivors, what is an appropriate way to address anti-Semitism? Frankly, it's a little bit insulting.
It is insulting for you to think that I don't understand bigotry and racism, because I understand it. And if someone was a bigot or a racist, and you ask me about them, I will always say that it is wrong to traffic and meet with bigots and racists, regardless of what you might think about me and talking about a Jewish person. I'm not talking about the Holocaust. He's a Holocaust denier. You're bringing up the Holocaust. A Holocaust denier met with the former president who you worked with. That should be more insulting to you than me talking about how you should respond to it, how you should respond directly to it.
let's take a step back, Don, and let's focus on the real issue of concern for both of us, which is there's a rise in anti-Semitism in the United States and the world, and we should not give a platform to any Holocaust deniers or anti-Semites wherever they are. And I think I don't think that the president should have met with Kanye or his sidekick, and I wish no one else will either.
You could have said that in the beginning. Thank you very much, Lynn.